There's no reason why that couldn't be your story.
You don't have an expiration date.
Ooh, I love that.
The actual pages. Like, that's all that matters at the end of the day.
This is the Authors and Agents Podcast. Alrighty. Danya, I'm so excited for you to be here with me today and talk about all things literary agent and querying. So let's go ahead and just get started into it. Tell me a little bit about what drew you to publishing and being a literary agent.
Yeah, so I've worked in pretty much every corner of the publishing industry at this point. I started my career when I was still in college at NYU, and I actually started at literary agencies. So I was an intern for the book group, I was an intern for another mid-sized agency, and then I was also interning at Random House in marketing a little bit while I was still in school. So when I got out of school, my first full-time job was as an editorial assistant at Riverhead Books, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House. And there I really got to learn all about how the publishing industry works. So I got to learn how agents submit to editors, how authors submit to agents, the whole thing. Basically, like, from my editorial point of view, I was able to really learn the ropes. But as you might know, I'm also a writer, and I do have my own books out as well. And I found that working as an editorial assistant was just not sustainable with my writing career. So when my first book came out, I sort of went on tour and came back and was like, I cannot physically be in all the places at once. You know, I was doing a whole bunch of jobs. I was assisting two people. I was running the backlist at the imprint. I was supposed to be acquiring books as an editor myself, and I was writing, and I was on book tour. So it was kind of impossible.
My goodness.
And at a certain point, I just burned out, and it was such a great job, and it was really, really sad to leave it. Particularly my boss there was really wonderful and super supportive of me. But it just, the structure of working at a publishing house just didn't work for me. So I moved out to Seattle, where I started to write full time, and found that I was really sad and lonely, and that was just not for me. So I ended up sort of accidentally meeting Michelle Brower, who is one of the founding agents at Trellis Literary Management, where I now am an agent. And she moved out to Seattle about 6 months after I did. And she sort of said, like, hey, do you know anybody who wants to read my client manuscripts and help me with edits? And I was like, ooh, that sounds fun. And
yeah,
I
you're
just
like,
sort
me.
of, yeah, and I just sort of spiraled in from there. So I started, you know, pulling authors out of her query box and editing their work. And it came to a point where she was like, do you want to be an agent? And I was like, yeah, I think so. So that's kind of how I ended up becoming an agent. It was really an accident. I honestly never thought I would do it, but it's turned out to be the perfect fit for me.
No, that's good. Sounds like you've tried a lot of different things in publishing. You had a lot of different positions, which has given you a good perspective, I'm sure, on the industry as a whole. So that is probably something your clients are really grateful for.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been editor, I've been author, and I've been agent. So the only thing I'm really missing is bookseller. I've never worked in a bookstore.
Well, maybe you need to moonlight.
Yeah, exactly. No, I don't have time.
So thinking about your job as a literary agent, what's like a big misconception that people have about literary agents?
I would say the biggest misconception that I see is that we're reading queries all the time. That, like, most of our job is reading queries. And, you know, I understand why querying authors want to think that. But actually that's a really tiny part of the job. I would say, you know, I look at my query box. I'm actually closed right now. I'm hoping to open up again in a few weeks. But I look at my query box maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks, and I try to just answer all of them in one go. And I don't have time to be constantly monitoring it. I don't think anybody does. So that's, I think, definitely the biggest misconception. I think, you know, most of our work goes to our clients. And then sort of the building the list comes when we have time.
Yeah. I think that is probably a huge misconception, because as writers who are trying to sign with a literary agent, the query is like the end all be all, right? The thing that they're focused on the most. So yeah, they would think, oh, a literary agent is the same way. But no, yeah, you have got clients who are in every stage of the process, right?
Exactly.
And you're just managing all of that.
All of that, and editing my clients' work takes up a ton of time. That's actually probably what I spend the most time on, is working on my signed clients' actual books. And submissions take a long time, contract reviews, meetings with publicity and marketing for my clients. You know, we have just constantly things to be doing to make sure our clients are on track and our books are on track. And looking at queries is really sort of not an afterthought. It's definitely not an afterthought. It's really important, but it has to come sort of between those lines.
Right, which is Sounds like you have a lot going on. And yeah,
Yes.
I think though it's nice that you can dedicate a little bit of time every couple weeks to just go through and do a bunch of them, right? Clear your inbox.
And that's
a
how I
bit.
handle it. I know certain other agents, look more regularly than I do, but I find that just really getting in the query mindset and knocking them all out is the way for me.
Yeah. So speaking about your job, what is the hardest part of being a literary agent for you?
There's a lot of hard conversations that I have to have, and those are definitely the hardest part. When a submission doesn't go how I want it to, or when an author hates their book cover, or when, I have to have a hard conversation with an editor about why their edits aren't in yet, that kind of thing. It's pretty regular, and I underestimated how difficult those conversations would be because, for writers, like, this is their career, and this is their passion, and it's their life, and it's their art, and there's kind of nothing more important for them and for me. And it's when it's not going perfectly, which is often, it can be really tough.
Very tough. And to have to be the one to deliver that news or
to sort of help someone understand it, I think.
That's very difficult. Well, on the flip side, what do you love the most about being a literary agent?
Oh, I love helping my clients figure out what their books are supposed to be. I think that's the best part for me, is like really looking at a piece of material and being like, I know what this is, and I'm going to help you make it what it is. That is so satisfying. Of course, selling books is really, really satisfying too. Making someone's lifelong dreams come true and being able to give them that phone call to say, like, we have an offer, you're going to be a published author, is like amazing. I bet that's the best. Yeah, it's the best feeling in the world. And especially since I'm such an editorial agent and I work really heavily with my clients on the page, having worked with them for so long before we have that moment is just all the better.
Oh yeah, because you're feeling a little bit sense of like, oh yes,
you
did this. It's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so fun. So speaking about queries specifically, so do you feel like queries need to stick to a specified formula? Like the way that we're supposed to do it, where there's a certain word count and you have to have these things, or do you think that queries should be out of the box?
Never be out of the box. Always stick to the formula.
Yes.
Please don't go out of the box. I beg you. I've had a few that have tried to go out of the box that have really, really hit me the wrong way. So, I think I posted one on Twitter that was just like one of the worst things I've ever seen, where it was like, I think the guy was trying to compliment my butt.
That's weird.
It was really unfortunate.
Bummer.
Really big bummer. And, he started off with saying, like, I could write a query letter and kiss your whatever. You've got a nice one, right? And I was like, oh, no, this isn't it. So really, guys, just write the query letter. It's really not that hard. And write it how you're supposed to write it. Follow the formula. It's so much easier for us to tell what your book is and who you are if you just follow the formula. And I find that trying to wrap my head around something in a short span of time that doesn't follow the formula is too annoying, and I will often just reject it.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially the way that you specifically read your queries, where you go in and you spend some time every couple of weeks, and you're reading how many at a time?
Hundreds,
right? Yeah. I imagine that one that's out of the box, like, even if they're trying to do it, like, in a clever way while still doing the formula, I'm sure it's a little bit more jarring than it is exciting, right?
Absolutely. I mean, what I get excited about is a well-written query that I find really promising, that follows the formula usually. Like when they're doing everything as they're supposed to, and the project sounds exciting, and the writer sounds exciting, and they've clearly done their research and targeted me, and the pages are good, that's when I'm like, yes. So, yes. Definitely follow the formula, please.
Definitely follow the formula. I keep asking this question because I know that there are people out there who are like, yes, but the formula is boring and I'm going to be exciting and fresh. And it's like, no, this is a good reminder. Please follow the formula.
Yeah. And the formula is not boring to me. No. I like to read your pitch. I like to see what you're working on, and I like to be able to understand it. And that's why the formula is there.
Yes. The formula is good. Please stick to it. Please stick to it. So besides something like totally out of the box, wrong formula, what would some of your top query no-nos be?
So in our query box, we ask for comparative titles, which is, sort of what would your book sit next to on the shelf? Who are you emulating? Who's your inspiration? And if you say, I am so unique and singular. There has never been anything like me out there. It just shows me that you haven't read enough to be writing a book. So it's always a huge red flag for me when you don't have any comparative titles. And comparative titles are really just, what books inspired you, what books feel to you like your book. If you saw your book on a shelf, what books would it sit next to, right? And that helps me understand what you're trying to do. It's really important. And I use those comparative titles, or I think of my own when I pitch your book to editors as well. So it's a really important aspect of the process. And it just shows me that you've done your research. You've been reading your whole life, right? You care about the industry. You care about books. I find that often the queries that are like, there's no comparable titles. My book is singular. There's nothing like it out in the world.
It transcends everything else.
They're also never good. So I think those two things really go hand in hand, and that's definitely a red flag for me.
Yeah. Do you feel like you can use movies or TV shows as comparative titles too? Yeah,
absolutely. I would pair them with books. I think you can use them as long as they're paired with books, and ideally contemporary books. Don't compare it to Pride and Prejudice or Harry Potter. Give me something that I can actually work with,
Yes. Let's not choose like huge international bestsellers. Let's choose something achievable.
Exactly. Show me that you've read in your space.
Yeah. I think that's a great one to remember. So besides just a well-written query, what's your favorite thing to see in a query?
When the sample pages just floor me. I love that. When the first couple pages are just incredible, and I'm like, I need more of this. And that does happen. I've signed quite a few authors that way through my query box by reading those sample pages and being like, this is the real deal. This is a beautiful writer, and this story is interesting. And that's really what gets me is the sample pages.
I think that's such a good reminder too, because there is such an emphasis on the query pages or the query letter itself, which there should be, right? You want to be able to write about your book in a catching way. But I think sometimes the first pages sometimes are like not as at the forefront of a writer's mind, and they really should be, because it's just as important, if not more important, than the query letter itself, right?
I think it's more important. I often will read a query where I'm like, "Ooh, this sounds amazing," and then I'll skip down to the pages and be like, not quite right. So I think it's more important. I mean, you have to have the query letter right as well, and your pages need to be strong. So they really go together.
Yeah, they do go together, but you want to make sure to not overlook your pages because you're obsessing over your query letter.
Exactly.
Yes, that's a good thing to remember. So would you have any like golden tips or rules for authors who are querying and just maybe a little bit stuck in the query trenches?
Yeah, I mean, really just follow the rules of each agency's guidelines. Make sure you do your research. It's really helpful if you can show an agent that you know who they are and you know what books they've done, and you genuinely think that your book will fit well with their list. I always pay more attention when someone says like, "Hey, I love that you've done this author. I think my book could fit well on your list because of these reasons." And I'm like, "Oh, you specifically sought me out and you think I will be genuinely a good fit rather than just like a mass email." And that I will always pay more attention to. I would also say if you're deep in the query trenches, think about tiering your rounds of queries. So I always tell people, do 8 to 10 at a time. Get your feedback in, and I would make like, it's like applying for college, right? You have your reach schools, you have your safeties. Combine like a third reach schools, a third middle tier, a third safeties for agents into like rounds, right? So I would do a little bit of each one in your first 8 to 10 people you send it to. So if you get feedback, you have not already sent to all your favorite agents.
Yeah.
And if you get an exciting note from one of them, even better. You're not losing out on anything. So I think doing it in rounds I think can be really wise, because often you will get like, "Hey, I read your sample pages. I wonder if you've thought about changing this to this." And if you get that twice or 3 times, you've got to change it, and at least you haven't sent it to everybody yet.
Yeah, you haven't. It can be such an exciting process. And it can feel like, okay, I just want to get this done. I'm going to send out all my queries to everybody on my list. But no, don't do that.
No, exactly.
Don't do that. Take your time. It is.
Exactly.
It can be such a harrowing process because it takes so much time. But you got to be patient. You got to learn to be patient.
I also think like 10 at a time. That's a pretty big pool. You will get some responses. Some people you won't hear back from, and that's just how it goes. But you will get some responses in a reasonable amount of time if you're sending to 10 people.
Yeah, you definitely will. And especially if you are taking some from each, tier on your list.
And I would say timeline wise, I would do 10, wait 8 weeks. 10, wait 8 weeks. Because I think that's kind of the amount of time where if you're going to hear back, you'll probably hear back within that amount of time. I mean, of course, some agents do take longer, but I think that's 8 weeks is pretty reasonable.
I think so too. And then you can find other things to fill those 8 weeks. Take your email off your phone if you need to.
Exactly. Get a puppy. I always say get a puppy. It's nice and distracting.
My 3-year-old keeps asking me for a puppy, and I'm like, baby, we'll talk when you're 5. I'm like, I can't do a puppy right now.
I got a puppy when my second novel was on submission to editors. And it was honestly like life-saving. I felt like, I was so distracted. He was peeing everywhere. I was like, I can't think about my book at all. It was great.
That is the perfect distraction.
Yeah,
Get a puppy.
He's asleep right here. I'll see if I can show you. Hey, bud.
Oh, so sweet.
My buddy.
Love it. Someday I do want to get my son a puppy, but just not while I have a 3-year-old and a 10-month-old. I need
that
them
sounds
to
like too much.
I need them to be older. I have
only one kind of potty training at once, right?
Yes, exactly. So thinking about, you've got query pages, you've read the whole manuscript, you're excited about somebody, you get them on the call. And what are some of the things that you think authors should be asking you when they're on that call?
I think authors should be always asking agents, so like, how do you see my career on the whole, long term? Sort of, where do you see positioning me? What kind of writer do you think I am? And how do you want to sort of pitch that? And I think that's an important question because it goes past just the one book you're submitting to the agent, right? You want to think about, this is a long-term relationship, right? You want to make sure that they're the right fit for your work long-term. Like if you, for example, if I'm talking to a writer and they're like, well, what do you think about me writing children's books? I'll be like, oh, I don't do children's books, but I can help you find a colleague who can help you with that. But something like that, you don't want those longer-term questions to come as a surprise later on.
Yeah. And I think it's a good reminder that it is a business relationship and hopefully a long-term relationship, right? But it can feel so much like, for some writers, and especially if you're burnt out, if you've been querying a long time, you're like, I'll take any agent who will take me, right? But you need to make sure, because then you could end up having to part ways and start the whole process over again, right? If it's not the right fit. So, the call is just as much for, I would say from my perspective as an author, like more for the author to be in control of interviewing the agent than the agent interviewing the author.
It's a two-way interview. It is not at all, like I find that when I do, conferences with pitches, I'll have 10 minutes with someone and they'll be so nervous to meet me. And I'm like, this is not a job interview. I'm just a person and you're just a person and we're just talking about your work. And that's really what this is. And I think remembering that too is really important. We don't have as much control as you want us to have either over the publishing industry, right? We can just sort of stick our necks out for people and that's about it. So remember that we're just
normal people. Here's what I love about my literary agent interviews is that I feel like it's helped demythical creatureize agents, because it can seem so daunting, oh my gosh, they hold all the power in the world in the publishing industry, and no, but you're such a great and helper to an author, right, throughout the process. But I think it's helped from my listeners, helped kind of change the way or the fear around an agent.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're just the bridge basically between the author and the industry, and thinking about it that way, it's just the first step. Yeah,
the first step, and someone to help you along the way, walk the path with you.
Exactly.
So I've just got a couple questions left for you. I'd love to know what you're most excited about representing next. When you reopen to queries, what are you really hoping is in your query inbox?
I really want to see unique and interesting thrillers and mysteries from writers of color. I'm really looking for that. I think I've been looking for that for a long time, really literary thrillers and mysteries that take a new or unique perspective. I love that. I love twisted, really weird, sort of high literary horror and speculative fiction. Yeah, I have to be really, really Selective because I'm trying to keep a small list to keep my writing career alive on the side as well. So I can't take on too many clients. So that's been kind of the hardest thing, where I see so many projects that I'm excited about. But, you know, if you send me something that I think is amazing, but I don't have the bandwidth to take on, I do often share with my colleagues at Trellis as well. We have a really solid system of passing things around to each other. So just know that, you know, if it's not me and I think it's promising, I'll still be able to share it.
I love that. That's nice. I'm sure authors appreciate it too, when you're able to be like, I love this so much, but I don't have the time for it, but I'm going to see if somebody else can take it. Yeah, that's great. So my last question, I'd love to know what your favorite book is right now. This is not your favorite book of all time, just something you've read recently that you're like, I really want everybody else to know about this too.
Yes. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, Gabrielle Zevin. I'm sure you've heard this before. That book is wildly popular right now, as it should be. I thought it was spectacular. I've never read anything like it. I've been a fan of Gabrielle Zevin, but I didn't know it since I was a teenager. She wrote a YA novel called Elsewhere that I read in my teen years that I absolutely loved. And when I finished Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow and looked up some of her reviews, I was like, oh my God, I've loved her for 15 years, and I didn't even know it. That book just blew me away. So I really, really recommend that one.
I love that.
Yeah, I loved it.
Great. Thank you so much. I love asking this question because I know we all have like 20,000 books we want to read next, but we can always add one more to the list.
Exactly. And if you're going to add one, that one is so great.
Well, good. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. And I hope the people who are listening who are interested in querying you learned a little bit more about you and what you're looking for, and can connect with you in some way to hopefully cross that bridge with you.
Yeah. Please find me. You can find me through the Trellis website. We use Query Manager.
Yep.
And it goes straight through the Trellis website. So when I'm open to queries, I will be available on there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And this has been a blast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.